The city's skyline glittered, a galaxy of ambition and shattered dreams. At its heart, in the most exclusive restaurant, sat Don Moretti, a man whose name was spoken only in whispers. His laughter, a low rumble, echoed through the private dining room. Across from him, a terrified businessman, Mr. Chen, trembled. Chen's shipping company was on the brink of collapse, and Moretti was his last, desperate hope. $10 million, Moretti said, his eyes glinting like polished obsidian. Your company is mine, and your debts are forgotten. A generous offer, wouldn't you say? He slid a contract across the polished mahogany table. Chen's hand shook as he reached for the pen, his face a mask of defeat and relief. This deal was a devil's bargain, but it was the only way out. He was selling his soul, but at least his family would be safe. Just as the pen was about to touch the paper, a soft voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, sir?" A young waitress, barely out of her teens, stood beside the table. Her name tag read Lara. She was new, her movements timid, her eyes usually fixed on the floor. But tonight, they were locked on the contract. I'm sorry to interrupt," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, "but you shouldn't sign that." His bodyguards tensed, their hands inching towards their jackets. Chen looked at her bewildered. Who is this girl to interfere in matters of life and death? And who, Moretti's voice dropped, cold and dangerous are you? Lara flinched but held her ground. Her gaze shifted from the Don to the terrified businessman. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of confidence. "That contract, it doesn't just give him your company, Clause 7b, subsection C. It gives him control over your family's assets, personally. Everything. Your home, your savings. Everything would belong to him if you default on any future agreed-upon terms." Chen snatched the contract back, his eyes scanning the fine print she indicated. His face turned from pale to ashen. The girl was right. It wasn't a lifeline, wrapped around not just his neck, but his entire family's. Moretti's eyes narrowed on Lara. This wasn't part of the plan. He prided himself on flawless execution, on reading every person in the room. But he had dismissed her as part of the scenery. "You have a sharp eye for a waitress," he purred, a predatory glint returning to his eyes. "Perhaps you missed your calling, should have been a lawyer." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "But you've made a mistake, little bird. You've flown into a cage you can't get out of." He snapped his fingers and his two bodyguards moved to flank her, blocking her only exit. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken threats. Lara's heart hammered against her ribs, but her expression remained surprisingly calm, a stark contrast to the fear that should have been there. "I'm not a lawyer," Lara said softly, her eyes never leaving Moretti's. "I'm just a waitress. But I know about deals like this. I've seen what they do to families." A flicker of something deep and sorrowful crossed her face. "My father, ... he made a deal with a man like you. He thought he was saving us." Her voice trembled, thick with memory. "He signed a piece of paper, just like that one. He lost his business, our home, ... He lost everything." She took a deep breath, her gaze hardening. "He lost himself. We found him a week later. Couldn't live with the shame." The room fell silent, the only sound the distant hum of the city. Chen looked at her, his expression a mixture of horror and profound gratitude. She hadn't just saved his company, she had saved him from a fate he now understood all too well. Moretti studied her, his calculating mind racing. The story was tragic, yes, but something didn't add up. Duh. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a cold, quiet resolve. This wasn't just a sad memory. It was a source of strength. "It's a sad story," he said, his voice laced with mock sympathy. "But your father's mistakes are not my concern." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But I'm a reasonable man. I appreciate talent. Perhaps there's a place for you in my organization. A much better paying position than this, I assure you." It was a test, a threat, and an offer, all in one. He was trying to see if her loyalty, her very soul, had a price. Lara looked from Moretti to his guards, then back to his piercing eyes. Faint, sad smile touched her lips. "The man my father made a deal with. His name was Falcone. A rival of yours, I believe. Or he was." Moretti's composure finally cracked. Flicker of surprise, of recognition, crossed his face. Falcone had disappeared a few years back, his empire crumbling overnight, The underworld buzzed with rumors, but no one knew what had happened. Falcone had a weakness, Alara continued, her voice steady and clear. He documented everything. Every dirty deal, every threat, every betrayal. He kept it all on a single, encrypted ledger. He thought it made him powerful. In the end, it was his undoing. The pieces began to click into place in Moretti's mind. He remembered the chaos of Falcone's fall, the power vacuum it created, a vacuum he had gladly filled. He had always wondered how it happened so cleanly, so completely. He stared at the shy, unassuming waitress. "My father was a good man," Alara said, her voice now resonating with a strength that seemed impossible. "He was a brilliant programmer before he started his own business. Before Falcone ruined him, he taught me everything he knew, about code, about encryption, about finding backdoors where no one thinks to look." She looked at Mr. Chen, who was watching this unfold like a scene from a movie, and then her eyes settled back on Moretti, cold as ice. "After my father died, I made it my life's mission to find that ledger, and I did." Moretti was speechless. The air crackled with the unspoken revelation. This girl, this child, was the ghost that had haunted the underworld for years, the architect of Falcone's downfall. "I gave the authorities everything," Alara stated simply. Anonymously, of course. They dismantled his entire operation without ever knowing who gave them the key. Moretti stared at her, a strange mix of fury and awe on his face. He had underestimated her on every conceivable level. She wasn't a waitress. She wasn't a victim. She was a ghost, a phantom of vengeance, hiding in plain sight. "You see, Don Moretti," Alara said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "I don't need your money. All I want is for men like you to stop destroying families like mine." Moretti's guards tensed again, but she didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a small, simple USB drive and placed it on the table between them. Moretti looked from the drive to her face, his expression unreadable. "Let Mr. Chen go," Alara said firmly. "Tear up that contract. Forget you ever met him. In exchange, what happened to Falcone? ... won't happen to you, at least not from me." It was an ultimatum, delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards. The hunter had become the hunted. It represented the ghost of his fallen rival and the quiet, unassuming girl who held his entire empire in her hands. Slowly, a strange, grim smile spread across his face. He picked up the contract he had offered Chen, and with a deliberate theatrical motion, he tore it in half, then in half again. He let the pieces flutter onto the table. "Mr. Chen," Moretti said, his voice surprisingly even, "it seems tonight is your lucky night. Your deal is off." He stood up, gesturing for his bodyguards to step aside. "The meal is on me." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind a stunned businessman, a torn contract, and a young woman who had stared into the abyss and made it blink. Alara watched him go, then let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. But for tonight, one family was safe. Now for her, that was a victory.